Alright, so basically what my test is going to prove is do quality of spark plugs along with quality of gasoline lower the carbon monoxide levels out of the tailpipe of your vehicle. What I'm going to use is I've got 4 different brands of spark plugs that I got from O'Reilly's in South Ogden. O'Reilly! They're an awesome company. All of the people at the counter have always been super nice to me. If you want good people to work with, buying car parts, head on over there. The brands of spark plugs that I'm going to use are Autolites, Champions, Motorcrafts, and Bosch. The Autolites are $1.99, the Champions are $5, the Motorcrafts are $7, and the Bosch laser hyper beam ones are $12.99 a spark plug. So then what I'm going to do is I'm going to install the Autolites into my own personal vehicle, and then once they're installed into the vehicle, I'm going to put in 85 octane fuel. I'm going to read the readings out the tailpipe, then we're going to take it for a drive, and every 50 miles on this drive, I'm going to stop and read the tailpipe emissions of the carbon monoxide using this pile meter. I think it's pronounced pile, I'm not quite sure because they put a Y in there. But it basically just reads the ppm of carbon monoxide in the atmosphere where it's coming out, and it reads from 1 up to 1,000 ppm of carbon monoxide. So we're going to use that along with this special cone that will stick in the tailpipe and then stick the meter in so the wind can't blow it away and skew the results. So after I've done the test at 85 octane with all the spark plugs, I'm basically going to just repeat the test with 87 octane fuel and 91 octane fuel. I'm going to try and make sure that the temperature of the day, the wind conditions, and everything are all the same for every test, or as close as I can get them, and I'm just going to keep doing it. After every test, the vehicle will cold soak for 8 hours, and I will then install new spark plugs and go and drive it. Alright, so the car that we're going to test the spark plug quality and fuel quality test on is a 2006 Ford Escape. It's a prime unit with a 2.3 liter Duratec motor with a manual transmission. It's front wheel drive. Just shy of 194,000 miles. Doesn't leak a single drop of oil, and it doesn't burn any oil to the best of my knowledge. I never have to add any during oil changes. Got all the fluids topped up, fresh new oil change. What I've done is I've gone through and I've set all the tire pressures exactly to what the tire placard says in the door, and then during the test I will, every time I check the carbon monoxide out of the tailpipe, I'll check all the tire pressures to make sure they're all staying the same. For the most part, everything about this vehicle runs great. Passed safety and emissions not too long ago, so it should, in theory, be a good test subject.
Lost my love, lost my life.
So after driving damn near close to 2,000 miles, spending a lot of time in my car that I could never get back, I came to some conclusions about the spark plugs and the fuel. The first thing that I came to is that different brands of spark plug and fuel didn't change the carbon monoxide readings every 50 miles very drastically. There's some minor differences, but where the huge difference was on cold starts. So on the cheaper spark plugs, the Autolites and the Champions, my meter couldn't even read how much carbon monoxide was coming out because it was so bad. The Bosch and the Motorcraft plugs on cold startups polluted much, much less. And it changes with the octanes of fuels. And I've got all that results here too. But one thing I did notice is we're going to go over these spark plugs. So after each spark plug got, several hundred miles on them each, so the Autolite spark plugs, in all honesty, burned the best. The Champion ones, as you can see, have a white oxidation that was burnt on the ground strap. It just seemed goofy. The Motorcraft ones, it's kind of hard to tell, but the ground strap had burnishing marks from the metals. When you heat them up, how they change colors to all the blues and purples. Well, the Motorcraft ones had that down the ground strap, which I thought was interesting. And the Bosch spark plugs had a bunch of carbon built up on them. I did notice a little bit I didn't do any fuel calculations on fuel mileage or economy, but after driving the same stretch of road, almost 2,000 miles, I can kind of see where my gas tank levels were at and where they should have been, where they were prior and whatnot. And so I have a little bit of I don't have actual numbers, but I do know that there was some better fuel ratings and economy with some plugs and fuel combinations. And we'll go over that here with these charts. So this chart here basically explains the parts per million tolerable limits for living and working in. Most of the vehicles that were driven during the 50-mile intervals were actually under 9 parts per million. So they were actually fine for living in. The cold soaks were found around the 800 range, above or below a little bit. So here in the 85 octane fuel, in all honesty, I thought the Motorcraft spark plugs would have the best readings the whole time. And as from this one, they didn't do very good with 85 octane fuel on the 50-mile drives. The other spark plugs from the chart before, you can all see, were right around the tolerable limits for living, so they weren't that bad. But the cold soak numbers were incredible. The Autolites and the Champions were horrible, and the Motorcraft and the Bosch actually weren't too bad. I mean, you breathing that in for 2 hours and you're going to die, but you don't cold soak for 2 hours. So it seemed, I mean, I guess this was for the cold startups. The cold startups weren't as horrible as I thought they would be. As for the 87 octane fuel, the Autolites weren't the best. They were the worst in the 50-mile drives. Their cold soak numbers, you can see, were the exact same, over 1,000. And the Bosches actually had the best 50-mile drive cycle for the parts per million. And the cold soak for the Motorcrafts actually was the best again in this. As for the 91 octane fuel, we can see that everything's kind of trended downwards in the 50-mile drives. The readings are getting a little bit better, and except for the cold soaks, those numbers still are horrible for the Autolites and the Champions. But the numbers for the Motorcraft went down and the Bosches went up a little bit, which was surprising. And the Champions actually had the best 50-mile drive cycles on this one. But the numbers are so close between the Champions, Motorcrafts, and Bosches that it doesn't really change much. So ultimately what it comes down to is the Autolite spark plugs with 91 octane fuel seem to get the best fuel economy. I have no exact numbers, but it's what it seemed to get. Those spark plugs also seemed to look like they had the best burn pattern on the plug after driving them. So from a pollution standpoint, running the OEM spark plugs with 87 octane fuel or above gets you the best pollution readings in regards to carbon monoxide. You get the lowest amount of carbon monoxide with running this setup. So everybody, run OEM spark plugs, run decent quality fuel, change them regularly, and help save the environment.